without Jesus Christ, there is no hope. There is no truth with a capital T. There is no even external objects. There is no chair. There is just complete loss. There is darkness, and there is blind searching out and just not being able to feel or find anything. My name's Michael. I'm from Columbia, Missouri. I've been saved a little over a year, about a year and a week and a half. I was saved on campus, actually at the University of Missouri here. There was an evangelistic outreach from a group in Kirksville. Winding backwards, there are a lot of threads that, as I've walked with the Lord, I realized more and more how great a tapestry it was. Starting back a little over, probably about 10 years ago, when I was about 13, 14, I remember I sat in my bed, because I was raised in a house where God existed, but there was no real Christ. There was no real religion. It was just God exists, and if you're good, then you'll probably get something at the end of it. But I remember hearing something about maybe God doesn't exist, God doesn't do all these really remarkable things anymore. So I sat in my bed and I said to myself, well, God doesn't exist. And I pulled the covers over my head, and I wasn't immediately struck down with a lightning bolt. And so from then on, it was sort of, well, maybe God doesn't exist. And it seemed to be, at the time, very freeing in terms of now I could do anything. You know, I think it was Nietzsche who said that if God is dead, then all acts are permissible. So everything suddenly became open to me, and I started looking for anything and everything that could explain anything, starting with the premise that God doesn't exist. And so over the years, I sort of had this thorn in the back of my mind, and I went to a Lutheran church. I asked a woman to be my godmother. That really came to nothing. I had no drive or unction to read the Bible, to attend the church. And so, having all of that fail, I started really getting into philosophy. I started really reading guys, you know, like Descartes, Nietzsche, Freud, the newer atheist guys later on, like Dawkins and Dennett and all of these guys, and basically searching and scrambling for absolutely anything that seemed like truth to me. It didn't necessarily matter if it was provable outside of myself, just that it seemed right. I mean, it says in Scripture that there's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is death. And it really sunk me down low. There was no real value to any of it. I've still got the scars very faintly on my arm that testify to how low I got in just depression and all of these other things, and I just tried to seek absolutely anything else. And so I tried to become this intellectual, try to go through men to find the reason for everything, since men are all that we have. And so to that end, I started studying at the university philosophy and getting really into all of these theories about how you can't, going from Descartes, you can't prove anything outside of yourself, outside of your own mind. As I've said to people before, I could really earnestly make you believe, at least entertain the idea, that the chair I'm sitting in doesn't exist, that the house I'm in right now isn't real. You know, it's like Morpheus said in that movie, you know, what our experience is outside of electrical signals interpreted by our brain. And if you go to the logical conclusion of that, really they're nothing, which means that we are nothing, which means that everything is inconsequential. So what's the point? You know, and that just sort of stuck, and I started being okay with that. But as I started studying more and more, I took a class probably a year and a half to 2 years ago now on the varieties of religious experience, because it seemed to me that regardless of my lack of faith, there was something still valuable about faith. There was still that thorn that said that there was something amiss. And so in the varieties of religious experience class, I really got a sense of a faith in faith, and I valued people who had faith because it seemed like there was something else. I didn't know what. I was just looking for it in men. So the it became what I was looking for in terms of truth, lowercase t. And so through seeking that in this class, and through reading one of Richard Dawkins's books, actually, a strident, militant atheist, leading me to consider the things of God as pretty glorious. He considered it a perceptual burqa, which is essentially what he means by that is that when you have a burqa, you have a very small window of perception, and there's so much else. And the everything else that humans can't possibly perceive was an idea that really stuck with me. I really started considering what that could mean, what if these religious experiences that I was learning about had anything to do with that, if there was any reality to them. A lot of them just seemed like, they could just be anything that anybody happened to experience on a cold day, and it was just, okay, whatever. But there was something in the very core of it that seemed to resonate. Something was more real than electrical signals. And so I just started thinking about those things, and I decided, okay, well, maybe there is something beyond human capacity. Very broad thought, but that was 4 days before that Kirksville evangelical outreach, where I was sitting and mocking a I'll be honest card about how you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And I was sitting with two friends of mine. We were talking about how ludicrous that is, since truth can't exist outside of perception, and the perception is based on faulty whatever. And we were just laughing about this, and a girl from Columbia came up and talked to me and just asked, can I ask what you guys are talking about? Obviously she knew what we were talking about, but it was that conversation that really led to just me thinking about more and more the things outside of myself. After about an hour, my two friends left the conversation, tried to pull me away, but there was something different about this person. There was something real, something that really struck me about this person. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I really wanted to continue talking to her, and so I continued talking to her for about 2 hours, I think, after that. So it was about a 3-hour conversation at Speaker Circle. And then we parted ways. I think she was sort of pulled away because I guess a lot of people there are kind of used to talking to atheists and are sort of hesitant to follow up on that because there's a lot of just animosity. I started mocking them, was how the conversation started. So it became very clear that what she believed so much more than anything that I believed, that she had to have some kind of truth that I was just not privy to at all. I had no idea what she was referring to, what she was pulling these arguments out of, because I was trying to get at her at any sort of argument that I could about morality questions, about really sort of painful questions about like abortion and all of these other things like murder and rape and all of these things. And really what struck me was that every single response that she gave was essentially the gospel of Jesus Christ and the good news of his coming and his dying and the reality of sin, and that's all that she would say. There was no argumentation. There was discussion about what I was bringing up, but the argument was essentially, this doesn't really matter. What matters is Jesus Christ and him crucified. And she kept nailing that home over and over again. And by the time we split, there was a real drive to want to read the Bible, to see what she was talking about, if any of it was true. And so I started asking around, what types of Bible do you guys read? There was a bunch of translations. I'd heard all of these arguments about how we can't trust all these different translations because they've been translated so many times from so many different people. But after a little while, there was a Bible that just sort of showed up. This friend of mine who came to Kirksville was talking about me. Apparently, she had brought me up for prayer. Someone from the church had an extra Bible that they'd happened to bring one day. They just sort of said, oh, well, I already have one, but I'll bring this one just in case. It was a little small, tiny little guy. And this friend of hers gave it to her to give to me, and I started reading it. And I started with John, and I started just really considering the things of God and wondering what was actually happening to the world, essentially. And I continued talking to this friend of mine